What's up, you guys? I'm Dan, this is Frugal Not Cheap, and today we'll be talking about an 1,800-mile road trip in a Tesla Model S. In late May of 2021, I made the move from Manchester to Hampshire all the way down to Plano, Texas. I sold or gave away everything that wouldn't fit in my Tesla Model S. And actually you can fit quite a lot of stuff in a Tesla Model S because it's a hatchback, and with the back seats down, there's a huge amount of storage room back there. Anyway, I've got some frugal moving tips that I put together in a video heading up towards the move, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. So my dog Max and I took off on this 1,800-mile road trip, and it went really well, and I think we can break down the experience into the following parts. First of all, we've got charging time. Then we've got Supercharger amenities, then we have the navigation system, and finally we'll talk about the actual driving experience. When I talk to people about owning an electric car, some of the first things that they ask me are how much range does it have and how long does it take to charge? What they really want to know is how much less convenient is it than owning a gas car. Well, my 2017 Tesla Model S 75 kilowatt hour rear-wheel drive has a stated range of about 250 miles. But it's bad for the battery to discharge all the way down to zero, and it's also bad for you to regularly charge your battery over 90%. So what that means is really the usable portion of the battery pack is between, let's say, 10% state of charge and 90% state of charge. I charge my battery up to 90% every day. And so that's 80% of the 250 miles, or right around 200 miles. Another thing we need to understand about electric car batteries is that they charge very quickly when they're empty, but they have to charge much slower when they're getting full, because otherwise it'll cause damage to the battery pack and it creates a lot of heat. In other words, it's much faster to charge from 20 to 30% state of charge. This might take only 5 minutes. Than it does to take charge from 80% to 90%, which could take over 10 minutes, maybe 12 or 13 minutes. In practice on my trip, I found myself charging for an average of about 25 minutes, going from around 15 to a 20% state of charge when I arrived at the charger to between 70 and 80% state of charge before I left, usually closer to 70. Before taking off though, I thought I'd be sitting at the charger for long periods of time, and I'd have enough time then to film more content for you on the camera and give you some updates. Also maybe even watch YouTube or Netflix in the car. In fact, I signed back up for Netflix just so that I would be able to get more Netflix content on the road on my way down. And my car, I bought it used this year in 2017, and it came with free premium connectivity. So that means that instead of having to pay, I think about $10 a month like other people do these days, my car comes from the free LTE connection and unlimited data. So I can stream YouTube and Hulu and Netflix and what have you, and Twitch in the car whenever I want to. So I thought I'd be watching a bunch of shows and YouTube videos and all this, but what actually happened is I would arrive at the station, I'd go to the bathroom, maybe buy some food and water, sometimes have a little snack, walk Max, of course, he needs to be walked as well, maybe feed him some food and water while we were out there next to the car. And next thing you know, after I've put in my next destination, it's time to go. So really there just wasn't all that much time. These stops were relatively brief, and for the most part they were really quite good. Then it'd be about a 2.5 hour drive to the next Supercharger station. We do the same thing over again and then head back out. So I usually made around 4 or 5 stops a day. So I found it to be really not a big deal, but we do have to say that compared to a gas car, it did add, I don't know, if you net out the fact that you need to go to the bathroom and get food and all the stuff with a gas car as well, also walking Max would have been necessary in a gas car, I think it added about 5 hours total over the 3.5 days that I was driving. So it's really, on a daily basis, pretty negligible. I don't think it was a really big deal, but we can't say that it is equally as efficient as a gas car because, of course, gasoline cars will fill up faster, and they will also require fewer charges because my electric car is a little bit older, again from 2017, and the 250-mile range is not as high as some of the newer cars. For instance, the new Model S Plaid that's just coming out, the long range, gets over 400 miles of range. So that's pretty impressive. All that said, to me, it's not really a big hardship to add a few hours on such a long road trip, and I think it's totally worth the switch to electric. All right, so the stops at these superchargers were not all that long at all. What about the amenities that were there at these superchargers? Where are they located? Well, there's really quite a lot of variety. But the good thing is the in-car navigation system. When you click on a supercharger, it'll pop up and say what kind of things are available nearby. Is there food? Is there lodging? Is there a restroom? And what I didn't know until after I'd finished the road trip is that actually you can click on the little icons for those amenities to get more details. So it would have been good to know. It'll be good now to know that for my upcoming road trip. I'll be driving back up to Knoxville, Tennessee, which was actually one of the points where I stopped overnight on the trip down here for a family reunion in September. So we may see some more content around that time. And fingers crossed, there will be some cool software updates as well between now and then that we'll be able to show off as well. But anyway, like I was saying, there's a great amount of variability in terms of what's available at a given supercharger stop. Probably the worst experience I had was when I went to a supercharger at an outlet mall early in the morning before anything was open. So there's really nowhere to go. I mean, maybe if I'd hoofed it a little bit, I could have gone to like a coffee shop. There was some kind of a coffee place for a restroom or what have you, but there was nothing conveniently located just within a short walk from where the superchargers were. So that was a bit of a bummer. Next up would be the stops that were near just maybe a couple of restaurants, that kind of thing. I had a couple like that. So yeah, you could use their facilities, and if you like the options that were there for food, you could get something. But this being frugal, not cheap, and me being who I am, I wasn't about to get restaurant food on this trip, right? So a level above that, my second favorite, were stops that were close to strip malls that had grocery stores in them. So I think once I was near a Kroger. Another time I was near a Market Basket at the beginning of the trip. And then, of course, you can go into the supermarket. They've got restrooms. They've got big bottles of water for cheap. And then, of course, they have prepared foods. Lots of options for prepared foods, just stuff you can get to go. Chicken Caesar salad wrap or, whatever, right? Little things like that. And so that was really convenient and very economical and something that I absolutely recommend if you're doing a road trip. Also a good way to kind of keep off the calories, because what you'll be eating if you're doing fast food or restaurants going to be a lot more calorific than some of the prepared foods that you can get at grocery stores. But my absolute favorite in terms of the supercharger experience were superchargers that were right at Sheetz gas stations. So what that meant, it's a very, very short walk, from the supercharger stall into the Sheetz gas station. They've got nice, clean bathrooms. They have a huge sort of convenience store and food. Actually, they do hot food too, but they also have like a lot of selection in terms of prepared foods as well. And they're relatively high quality, relatively fresh, and relatively healthy. So I really, really like those. If it was the morning, I'd get some coffee. I'd get my food and water for the whole day, and then we'd have that in the car for the rest of the trip. And then later on the day, we'd probably just stop at those. Have a nice clean bathroom, walk max, and then he and I would have lunch next to the car or on the curb somewhere. Some of them had some outdoor seating, some patio seating as well. So a really good experience. Top were these Sheetz gas station superchargers. Really, really happy about them sort of teaming up together with Tesla. Next, let's talk about the navigation system that took us between these superchargers. So I'll say that the in-car navigation system in Tesla is great. It's really easy to set your destination. You can just use voice commands, and there's no going through a bunch of different menus of, what state, then what city, then what street, and what number, the way that I used to have to do in my old 2010 Acura TSX, which is the car that I had just before I got Natalia, my Tesla. The other thing that's great about it is having the two screens. So you've got the main screen, which has sort of a further out view of your route. It also tells you, it's got a list that you can expand or contract that shows you what your next steps are in the trip, what your state of charge is going to be when you arrive at your next supercharger, how long it's going to be until you get there, how long you're going to be sitting there charging. And then in the binnacle behind the steering wheel, there you've got sort of a more zoomed in view especially when you're in town, so you can see, okay, it's going to be 3 streets before my next turn, or that kind of thing. And it's a quicker glance to look down there instead of looking all the way over at the main screen, kind of in the middle, that's a little further away from your view. So once, of course, these cars are full self-driving, it's not going to matter. But for now, I do think that having the additional screen is definitely a plus for the Model S and the Model X over the Model 3 and the Model Y that only have the center screen in landscape. And one important thing to point out that some of the people I've talked to don't seem to realize is that when you set a destination that's far away in your Tesla in-car navigation, it will automatically plan your route based on available superchargers, and it'll tell you how long you're going to be sitting at them. And then while you're driving, it's really easy to alter your route. If you want to stop at a different supercharger, you can just click on it and set your destination to there. But as great as the system is, I do have a couple of criticisms. The first criticism, and this is something that Elon has recently said that they're actually going to implement in the next major overhaul of the software, is that you can't do waypoints. So the system will calculate your route and populate all the superchargers it thinks you should stop at, but you have no flexibility in terms of customizing that or adding stops. Let's say this was a family trip and you wanted to see certain attractions. You really can't do that. You'd have to set each destination in steps, and yeah, that's really not as convenient as being able to do waypoints.
Okay, does everybody here want waypoints? All right, fine, we'll do waypoints. God damn it. All right. 2 weeks.
The second thing is that it doesn't really allow you to customize it in terms of the charging experience. So what I mean by that is the Tesla system optimizes for the minimum number of stops. So it's going to calculate getting you to the next supercharger with at least 10% battery remaining, which for my tastes felt a little bit low. This is my first trip, and I wasn't sure that was going to be enough. And 10% of 250 miles is the 25 miles range. Plus, there's a reserve, I think, of another 10 miles or so. So 35 miles, which isn't bad. But it was my first big trip in the car, and I was a little leery. And instead of arriving with 10%, I would rather arrive with, say, 15 to 20%, which is what I did in practice, right? I think now I'm a lot more comfortable with it, and I'd be okay with arriving with 15% state of charge, but there's no way to customize that off of the 10%. So that's another thing that's not so great right now. And then there are those who argue that because the battery charge is so much faster when it's empty, that it's actually faster in terms of the total travel time, so charging and driving, to charge more frequently. Rather than charging the battery up to 80%, you might only charge it to 60% each time or something like that. And I thought this argument made sense, and so I got a third-party app called A Better Route Planner. You can get this app, you can tell it what your minimum state of charge is, so that's where I put in the 20% is. Your maximum state of charge is 90%. You tell it what model car you have, and it's really a good app, and it does this. It minimizes the total travel time, accounting for the fact that you charge faster when the car is on empty. However, in practice, now that I've done this nearly 2,000 mile road trip, I'll say that I'm no longer convinced that that's the best way to go. And the reason why is that each stop to a charger means you've got to get off the freeway, and then you've got to find the charging station. And it's not always that clear exactly where the charging station is based off the nav. Like if it's in a strip mall or something like, I don't know, there are just many times when it gets you right near there, but it's not all that clear exactly where it is, and sometimes it was a pain to get to. So when you account for that, and then of course having to backtrack and get back on the freeway, I'm not sure that the time savings are really all that big. So what I'm probably going to do in the future is really just use the in-car navigation system and wait a little bit longer at each stop until it tells me I'm going to arrive at the next stop with my desired state of charge, which is 15%. So it might mean that I stay 5 minutes or as much as 10 minutes more than the car says I need to necessarily, but I'll have that little bit of a buffer, and so I'll feel more confident about the trip. And I think that'll work quite well. There might be some instances where I've got to choose a different supercharger than the one that it's picked out for me, but I think for the most part it's going to go quite well like this, and I don't think I'll be using a better route planner when I go on my next trip to Tennessee in a couple of months. Finally, what was it like to drive the Tesla for almost 2,000 miles? Well, I almost put air quotes on the drive, because one of the best things about this car, and one of the main reasons that I bought it, is because of all of the safety or sort of autopilot type features. I injured myself a few years ago. I'm not really sure what's going on, seeing some doctors trying to get a handle on it. But it does seem to be a little bit of a mystery. But one of the things that happened is that my ankle fatigues when I keep my foot on the accelerator for very long, and so I was a little bit worried about doing that with my Acura TSX. But with the Tesla having the traffic-aware cruise control, which means it's going to it's going to slow down and accelerate based on the traffic in front of us. Then also having autopilot, meaning it's going to keep itself centered in the lane. And then in my case, lucky enough to have the full self-driving package, not the beta, but the hardware and the enhanced autopilot, navigate and autopilot, and all that stuff. It also does things like pass slow cars, changes lanes to get to your exits. What else does it do? That's basically it for now. There's some other kind of gimmicks in there, like summon and enhanced summon and auto parking, which are cool, but in practice not super reliable, slow, and just a little bit dangerous, because they're just not quite polished enough yet. But the highway stuff was amazing. I can't say enough about it. So always kept the car perfectly centered in the lane. I never had to worry about traffic suddenly slowing down or speeding up and keeping up with all that stuff, with cars cutting me off, anything like that. The car reacted much more quickly and had much more awareness than I ever could have. Of course, I was keeping an eye on the road as well. It does require you to put a tug on the steering wheel every now and then, or to keep a little torque on it all the time, which is what I chose to do. It's a lot less sort of pain to do that than to torque it every little while. It's just to kind of keep a little torque on it through your hand position and having a little weight on it on the steering wheel. That's what I chose to do, and it was a lot easier for this long road trip. So it's just much more relaxing than any long drive I've ever done in my life. Unless I wasn't driving, of course, right? But this is the closest you can get to it right now, without having someone else in the car with you, and it was awesome. Really, 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 really relaxing. Got to focus on the music that I was listening to. Also got to focus on what other cars were doing, so I could see if someone was going to do something crazy, and then just providing a little bit of basic oversight to see whether my car was going to do something silly or not. Sometimes we'd have to adjust the maximum speed, just to make sure that I could navigate certain, maybe a construction zone, or if we were right next to well, not right next to semi. It did really well with that stuff. That was really cool. But there were some times where I had to do some small tweaks, but generally it was just absolutely incredible. One of the most memorable and amazing times for me was while I was driving up in Tennessee. We had torrential rains, really, really heavy rains where visibility was sharply reduced. And there were some other cars that were driving really, really fast, and I would not have felt comfortable driving as quickly as they were. So what I did is I slowed down quite sharply, got into the rightmost or slowest lane, and I let the car do its thing. And it kept me perfectly centered in the lane, much better than I would have done with this kind of visibility. It was also able to react to cars that were up ahead much faster than I was. My car still uses radar, so that might have been helpful. I'm not sure, but it did just an amazing job, and really turned what could have been really. Sometimes it was raining heavily enough where I probably would have just pulled over, or I would have gone maybe 25. Whereas with the car doing all of this stuff, I felt more comfortable with it, driving it around 35 or 40 miles an hour or so instead. So really, really cool. I can't say enough about that. And Yeah. On top of that, then of course it's a very comfortable car to drive in. While my car doesn't have the upgraded air suspension, it's just got a standard suspension. It's still very compliant and very comfortable. The seats are very, very comfortable. The sound system's also quite good, especially now that I've kind of played around with it a little bit and figured out that what are the best kind of audio sources and settings to use for it. So yeah, no, listening to music was great. The comfort was really, really good, and having the car do most of the work while we were driving was just incredible. It's not all perfect. One criticism that I had in my original review of the Model S still stands, and that is there's just too much noise coming into the cabin, which means that I have to turn the music up louder than I otherwise would have, and it kind of drowns out still some parts of the music that you can hear when you're going at slower speeds or at a standstill. So the sound system is actually really quite good when you're stopped or going at slow speeds, but once you start going faster, even though you can't try to compensate with the volume, it still just doesn't sound quite as good as it could otherwise. So a little bit of a thing. I think they've really addressed that in the new Model S's, the new long range, and the Plaid. They really, figured out the insulation and also the sound system as well. So overall, I would say that my trip from New Hampshire to Texas went very smoothly. I'm extremely happy with my purchase and with the Tesla experience. I do wish I'd taken a little bit more footage for you guys while I was on the trip. I really didn't take much at all. Just, there were long days on the road, and much of it was pretty monotonous, frankly. And then I thought I'd be filming at these Supercharger stops, but like I told you, these stops were much shorter than I thought, and I was pretty busy at every stop as well. So I just didn't get around to doing that. I'm sorry, but hopefully you still got a lot out of this video. I think hopefully it was helpful to let you know what it's like to do a long road trip in an electric car, specifically, of course, the Tesla, though, because of the Supercharger network, which is really, really huge advantage of Tesla over its competitors. So all that being said, again, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. It really helps out the channel. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.